Locho sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trile yarmuda pelge drolor zam se parachi palde lame shab solvade Omo a guru vajra dara suma timo nisha sane karm Uta varda nishri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Om Guru Vajradar Sumatimo Nisha Sane Karm Uta Varda Nishri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi hum Om Guru Vajradar Uta Varda Nishri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi hum Om Guru Vajradar Sumatimo Nisha Sane Karm Uta Varda Nishri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi hum Om Guru Vajradar Nisha Sane Karma Uta Varda Nishri Badra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Pakyuke kudan dagi lu, pakyuke sundan dagi nga, pakyuke tukdan dagi yi, ten yerme chiktu chingi alo, makyuke kudan dagi lu, makyuke sundan dagi nga, makyuke tukdan dagi ten yerme chiktu chingi alo. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha. Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chin Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamge Drola Penchre Sangye Druparesho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamge Drola Penchre Sangye Druparesho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Jinso Gibe Sonamgi Drola Penchre Sangye Druparasham. In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge unto enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we will start with the praises. In page number 7, I will read the Tibetan, and then after that, we will read together first the Italian and then the English. Okay? Uje shugi sonye tarjen te dripje mumba sanshi chukunke. Nigi sigan drola setsepa. Drowa kyoba lame tube wamporo dun. By accomplishing the two accumulations through the power of compassion, the obscure of darkness is cleared and all phenomena are known. Whatever is seen by you, you make it clear to my greatest. Munindra, Lord of the sages, unsurpassable refuge, to you I pay homage. Chikdu drola chambal harze pe tusung kundu chamgun shetrapa gyawe gyatsa mibang gombola ningne kube yigi chagi tong. Unique love for my greatest, which is embodied as a deity, renowned through the three times as the Lord of love, to the invincible protector, regent of the victorious, with respect from my heart, I prostrate with my mind. Devara shepa nige londen chin sabdan gyache tube luksampo salze shinda cheshin rabtrapa zamlin gendro chonye la chatse. You have been prophesied by the Sugata, the one gone to bliss himself, the profound and vast pure traditions of the capable one. By making them clear, you are renowned as the great chariot way openers. To the 6 ornaments and the 2 excellent ones of this world I prostrate. Kare rawe korwe yonchon dire degyo gondre dapton gebetse sarto sheba gyawa nibadang sombra ngawe chamgun lamara. In this land surrounded by a range of snow mountains, a garden blossoms with thousands of petals of sutra and tantras and commentaries, is refreshed, making you the son of the victorious. To the praiseworthy Guru, gentle protector Lama Tsongkhapa, I pay homage. Kange tinle vesre tongsamange lamsan tawe lomi saltepa Chetsun lama nimura chepewe danye peme siundrura tautu shun. By seeing just a ray of light of your spiritual actions, you make the mind's eye for seeing the pure path clear. Venerable Guru, light that shines like the sun, please remain always at the center of the lotus of my heart. Then we go to page 11, pagina 11. Korde künye malye pasimle jungwa yine she tübe sonrable shepe lödre namche chenamgi simge sangde shebrache. The defects of samsara and the qualities of nirvana, without exception, derive from the mind, as said in Buddha's teachings. Those who have intelligence and discernment must give importance to knowing the secrets of the mind. So, the first thing we need to understand here today is that our mind is not something completely solid. It is made of parts, as everything else that exists in reality. It doesn't matter what it is. If we really go to analyze it, we will see that it's made out of parts. And the whole unity does not exist independently of the parts that form this unity. So, it's like yesterday we made the example of when we make a dish of food. No? The food that we will prepare does not exist independently of the ingredients. If we make the example of a group of persons do not exist independently of the individuals that form this group. If I take a soccer team. The soccer team does not exist independently of each of the players. But if I do not understand what is the specific quality and the aspects of each one of them, I don't know. I would just see the whole team. So they are not playing well. Okay, that's the whole team. But if I know the qualities of each player, I can say, this player is not doing right here. This needs to move here. That needs to go there. And maybe in changing 2 players, I can change the whole team. Sure, I will change the whole team by changing 1 player, actually, even. So what happened is that once we know the parts, we see much better the potential that we have to change the whole. Okay. In the same way, if we have a group of people and something is not good in the group, we need to go to look which are the parts, which are the people that compose the group, where are the conflicts, what is the problem, where we can make better, how we can change inside the group, and by that we change the whole group. We don't need to throw away the whole group and make a new one. We need to go to understand which are the parts which are not good. By changing the parts, we change the whole. Okay? Similarly is with our mind. Every thought that we have, every perception that we have, is made out of many, many parts. Minimum 5. Then can be much more than 5, okay? Which are called the 5 mental factors, okay? So the group and the persons that compose the group are of the same nature, which means the group cannot exist independently of the individuals that compose the group. But the individuals that compose the group, the members of the group, cannot exist without the group existing. Otherwise, they are just individuals. The members of the group only exist once the group exists. Okay? So, they are of the same nature. If one exists, the other exists. If one don't exist, the other don't exist. Okay? I have prepared this text to help us to go through these teachings. It's based on the book that I studied before. And there is a note in the very beginning explaining this. But there is the part which is in italic. It's a translation of the commentary. Then the part which is written normally is what I have added. And then the part which is in italic and bold is the translation of the original text of Asanga, explaining the 51 mental factors. Anyhow, I have written something here. It doesn't look that bad, so I will just go through it and explain this part in page number 13, okay? As where the primary mind arises from apprehending the object of perception in general terms, the mental factor apprehends the same object in a particular way. So which means the primary mind, it has a general idea of the object of perception. The mental factors, it fixes on a specific aspect of that object. Okay? So it's like if we say the soccer team is playing against the other team as a whole. Then each player is having a different role inside to have that same objective. Okay? So, for example, if the object of perception is the form of a glass, which means an eye sensory perception, through the eye sense power we have and perception that sees the form of something. So if I am perceiving the form of a glass, the mental factor of feeling, sorwa, could be an experience of pleasure. So while I am seeing the glass, by seeing that glass, I experience pleasure. That's the sensation in relation to that. At the same time, the discernment would name it glass, and mindful recollection, tönpa, would keep the mind from becoming distracted. So I will have in the same moment that I am perceiving the glass, there are many things happening inside. I am having a sensation. I am giving a name to it. I am having, what example we have here, I am having the ability to keep my mind focused on that object. All these are mental factors. All these are aspects that compose that same perception. Okay? In this way, we can say that mental factors are different aspects that actually compose the primary mind. In fact, the primary mind doesn't exist independently from the mental factors that compose it. They are of the same nature. Furthermore, mental factors have different ways of relating to the same object of perception, but the object as a basis of perception is always the same, as clarified by the 5 concomitant aspects, which we will see later. Which means, if the primary mind has the object of perception of the cup, the form of the cup, all the mental factors, what will be the object of perception of every mental factor? The form of the cup. If I have a primary mind that is perceiving the sound of a voice, all the mental factors that are together, what will be the object of perception? That same sound. One will have the sensation, the other one will be the discernment, the one will be the intention, and so on. But each one will see a different aspect of it, but they all have the same. It's like if we say, if we have a soccer team, they are all playing against the same team. But each one of them is having a different function within that game. Okay, they are playing the same game, but each one have a different function inside that same game that is being played. Okay, in the same way, the mental factors and the primary mind always perceive the same object. But the primary mind is the general perception, while the mental factors are the specific perceptions that put together create the general perception. Okay? Making an example which is not so precise but maybe can help, it's like when we look to a movie, we have the general experience of watching a movie and we say, oh, that's a nice movie. But inside of it, we have many other parts together. There is the sounds that we listen of the music of the movie. There is the image that is happening. There is the emotions that is put inside. There are many things together. And from all of that, we have the sensation that's a nice movie. But that pleasurable experience of seeing the movie comes from many things which are inside together. Similar to that, every time that we have a perception of anything, and we can have a maximum of 6 primary minds simultaneously, which is an eye sensory, an eye consciousness, an ear consciousness, and consciousness that perceives form, the consciousness that perceives sound, the consciousness that perceives smell, the consciousness that perceives taste, the consciousness that perceives touch, and the consciousness that perceives mental objects, okay, which is called generalized meanings. So one of each one of these can be together. We can have we can have maximum of 6 minds or 6 consciousness at once. Okay? We cannot have 2 consciousness that perceive sound at the same time. We cannot perceive 2 different sounds at the same time. We can, as we are listening, it's one vibration coming and then we attribute a value to it and we're listening to that sound. But we cannot have 2 sound consciousness at the same time. We have one and then after we can have another, but not together. Normally when it looks like there are 2 together, basically we have one, then we go to the other and then we remember the one of before. But actually it's never together. As we touch, we have one touch that we feel at one time. As we have all the 6 consciousness, we have one at the time. They can change fast, but it's one at a time. We cannot have 2 of the same kind at the same time. Okay? We'll see a little bit more of that later. Then, as it continues here, let me see. The primary mind is established by means of apprehending its objects of perception. It refers to the mind that perceives phenomena through its ascertaining condition. The ascertaining condition is the form, the smell, the taste, the touch, and so on. Okay, it's the object of perception. The primary mind can be compared to the hand, while the mental factors would be the fingers, the palm, etc. of the hand. There are 51 mental factors which were named by Buddha Shakyamuni in this context of these teachings. Buddha described 51 mental factors, but there are much more than 51 mental factors. Okay? So namely, we will name 51, but there can be many others which are not being classified here. It's not something which say, oh, there is only 51 mental factors. There are more than 51 mental factors. But the 51 mental factors, they give a very good general idea. They are very, they can cover the whole area quite well. But still there can be other mental factors which are not the 51. Okay? So the 51 mental factors that compose the primary mind. They are almost like micro thoughts that make up the actual thought, the actual mind. A thought can be made up of various mental factors with a minimum of 5, the so-called 5 omnipresent mental factors. Okay? So it's like the minimum number of ingredients that we need is 5. We will see later which are these. The important thing that we need to understand now is that every thought that we have, every perception that we have, it can be physical in the sense of what we see, what we listen, what we touch, or what we think, is made of many parts. Okay? It's not only solid, it has many parts that compose that thought at the same time. Okay? The first thing that we will see now is to understand what are the different types of primary minds. Then each one of these primary mind have many different parts that compose, can have a minimum of 5 mental factors and a maximum of, I don't know, many. Okay, I never made this type of analysis to check, okay, what's the maximum number of mental factors that a mind can have, but it can have many at the same time, okay? So the importance of us understanding first what are the different types of primary mind is because it helps us to understand better how we perceive reality. First we go to look at the macro, we look what are the groups that we have inside ourselves, and then after that we go to see inside of these primary minds what are the parts that compose them. Okay? Yeah. I think the main reason is that when we perceive a sound, when we perceive a smell, when we perceive a form, and so on, the perception of this depends on one of the omnipresent mental factors, which is called contact. Contact is the union of 3 things: the object of perception, the sensory power, which is the actual ear, for example, and the ear sense consciousness. Okay? So, the vibration coming to the ear is one at a time. I cannot have 2. The form that is appearing to us is one. I perceive one, I understand it, then come another one, and I understand another one. It's like we have a continuum. It looks like a flow, but actually it's one coming after the other, no? That is, first we perceive one sound. Definitely put it there. First, we listen to one sound, and then after we can understand the next one. But like while we are listening, it's like, for example, when we listen to classical music of an orchestra. We have many instruments playing together, but it's coming to us as one sound. Okay? Then we can put our attention of that sound and we can divide. This is this instrument, that is that instrument, which means we put attention in a different aspect of that same sound that is coming to us. But it's one sound that is coming. Okay? When we look to a beautiful painting, we have many colors and many shapes, but they come at once to us. Then we can focus the attention in one color, in one image, or in another image. Okay? But the consciousness itself that perceives the senses, it once at a time. We're not able to see 2 things at the same time or listening to 2 things at the same time. Okay? Bene. So we go now to page number 50, where we'll see first which are the main, like the 7 main types of primary minds. Okay? So, now, as we go through the explanation of the 7 different kinds of cognition, which is 7 different types of minds that perceive reality, we are not just going to go through it in a very general way. We're not going to go into details upon it, okay? And I'm making quite an effort not to enter into details. Because what happens is that if we go into details, then after that, this means that we will enter into it, and then we stay this whole week only about this, because it is a lot to see. Normally, we study for a few years only this subject. No? without the 51 mental factors, just the 7 different types of cognitions. It takes normally around 1 year minimum in the monastery. So there are many, many books from Lama Tsongkhapa, from Kedru Rinpoche, from many, many great masters of all different traditions, thick books talking only about this, okay? So I just say this because we are just going to have now a general view so we can have a more general understanding. So then after, it's important to know what we don't know and know what we can know. So after we can go more into details another moment, or we can, who likes can go to study more deeply about it. So here we have. Mainly we divide the mind into two types of cognition, which is called the valid cognition and the non-valid cognition. Cognition refers to the way how we perceive reality. Okay? Perception of the world. So we have a valid perception and a non-valid perception. The valid perception, it means when we attribute a value that the object is capable to sustain. A non-valid perception is when we attribute a value that the object is not capable of sustaining. Okay? So when we talk about both, in the both case of valid cognition and non-valid cognition, we have two types mainly, which is direct cognition and indirect or inferential cognition. Okay? Direct cognition, it means mainly we have the direct cognition through our senses. When we listen to something, when we see, when we smell, when we touch, and we have also the mental direct cognition. Okay? The mental direct cognition is when we perceive something that is immaterial, but in a direct way, in a intellectual, how do you say? Yeah, not necessarily analytical, but in a the words are difficult to translate, but like in a non-cognitive way, in a non-intellectual way. Okay. So, for example, if we talk about the certainty of death, the impermanence of this life. One thing is that I reflect upon the certainty of death, and I have a conceptual way of thinking about the certainty of death, and then there conceptually, yes, I will die, I am sure about that, and I think about that, so I understand and I perceive the certainty of death conceptually. Another thing is when I experience directly the certainty of death. And then it's a perception that it's not even possible to put into words, because when we put something into words, it already becomes something conceptual. Words, it's naturally something conceptual. So, for example, the certainty of death is something immaterial. It's not something that when we say that it's something immaterial, we cannot see, listen, touch, smell, or taste the certainty of death. But we still can experience it. We still can know the certainty of death. So when we experience the certainty of death in a non-conceptual way, it is a direct mental perception. Okay? Or there's the same is possible with impermanence, or with interdependence, or with emptiness. But in the case of emptiness, it's given a different name. It's called an yogic perception. But it's always a mental direct perception. Okay? So, then there is another part also, which is said that when we have a sensory perception, for example, we listen to a sound, okay, right away there is a very short direct mental perception also. So it's, for example, one time I was in the car with some people, and then one person told me something, and then when I listened to that, I said, no, not possible, this person is telling me. That's too bad, you know. And I had a similar experience short ago also. I was in the United States going back to Brazil, and I was together with the Kuten Lama. And then he said something to me, and he said, no, he cannot be saying this. He made me a question. I said, no, he cannot be asking this. Then he made the question 2-3 times, and I was like this. And I was thinking, no, he cannot be making this question. That's not possible, you know. And then he made the question 3 times, I think, at least. And I was, you know, he cannot be making this question. It cannot be this, you know. It has nothing to do where we were. Then, suddenly, I was about to answer it, then I listened again in my mind of what he said, and I understood that what he was saying was the most stupid thing related to the tea that we were having, okay? And then, on another time in Brazil, I was in the car, a person said something, I said, no, that's not possible, something quite offensive, very offensive actually, and I was about to answer not nicely, but then I said, no, it cannot be this. Then I stopped without answering, I make rewind, and I re-listened what the person said in my mind. And then I saw that there was something very basic and normal, and there was nothing bad about it. Okay? So what does this mean? First of all, what comes to our ears is sound. Okay? The direct perception of sound just perceives sounds, doesn't give any name to it. Okay? Then, in the very right moment that it enters in our ears and we perceive the sound, we have also a small memory we place. Why can I remember the sound? Because what I am perceiving after is not the sound anymore. I am perceiving the memory of the sound. So basically, I am perceiving something that is mental. I'm not perceiving something that is physical anymore. So when I listen to the sound, basically I'm re-listening to the memory of the sound. And this is something mental. So this is possible because there is that very instant of mental direct cognition that perceives the sound just after the direct perception of the sound itself. And this is what allows me later to remember the sound that I have listened. Okay? Anyhow, this is just to say that we have many different types of direct mental cognitions. And when we talk in the practices of Dharma, our objective is to realize the immaterial things that we need to realize in a direct way, not in a cognitive way. No, not in an inferential, conceptual way. Because the conceptual perception is based on logic. It's based on the fact that I see something, and I relate this with something else, and based on that I get to a third point. Okay? So, for example, I see directly smoke coming out from behind a mountain. So based on that, I say, oh, wherever there is smoke, there is fire. So there is fire behind the mountain. I am sure about the fire behind the mountain. I perceive the fire behind the mountain through a logical process. I see one person, I see one car in a place, and what I think, oh, this person is here. Why? Because his car is here. It's not really a valid logic, okay? It's not because of the car of a person is in a certain place that necessarily the person will be there. But we make these connections in our daily life all the time. We have many, many, many inferential cognitions the whole day, all the time. And what happens is that whenever we have an inferential cognition, it can be a valid cognition in the moment that the mental image that we generate and we perceive is coherent with the actual object. Okay? So, for example, in the case of fire, it is a valid cognition. How do we know, basically, if our inferential cognitions are valid or not? To really know that, we need to follow the whole process of understanding if the logics that we are using are correct or not. Okay? And this is a whole other subject. So normally when we study this, when we go for the inferential valid cognition, the only way of knowing if an inferential cognition is valid or non-valid is checking if the logic that we are using is correct or not. Then here there is a whole other subject which is we call Tsemanamdrel, which is a whole subject talking about logic and dialectics and logical understanding and the different forms of correct logic and incorrect logic and so on, okay? We are not opening this subject right now. But we need to remember in our daily life that we have many, many inferential cognitions the whole time. And generally speaking, on a more deeper level, inferential cognitions by its own nature are wrong perception. Why? Because we think that we are perceiving the fire, but we are perceiving the mental image of the fire. Even though there may be real fire, and it's a correct inferential cognition, is not truly valid because there is the wrong perception in which we think that the mental image is the actual object. when actually it is not. Okay? So one of the important things for us about this is we need to train more and observe more if the logics that we use in our perceptions are valid or not. This is something which is very useful also. Okay? To understand how our perceptions go. So, we have the valid cognition, and then we have the inferential, which is direct valid cognition and inferential valid cognition. Then we have the non-valid cognitions, which is divided into wrong awareness, doubt, recognizer or subsequent cognition, correct or assumption, we have, which is a better word, and the non-ascertaining perceiver or cognition, which is wrong perceptions. Wrong perceptions or wrong awareness is what? For example, when I look at the flowers, it's a cognitive wrong perception. I look at the flowers and I say, oh, the flowers are permanent. Are the flowers permanent or are the flowers impermanent? Impermanent. So in the moment I believe the flower is permanent, this is a conceptual wrong awareness. Okay? If I look at a point of light and I turn it very fast, I see one circle of light in the air. If I see it as a circle and I believe it is a circle, is it a valid or non-valid cognition? Non-valid, because actually, is there a circle or is there a point of light going fast? There is just a dot of light turning fast, okay? If I see it, oh, that's a dot of light turning fast that appears as a circle, that's a valid cognition. But in the moment I think and I say, oh, look at the circle, that's a wrong cognition, okay? Or if I am on the airplane and I look down and I say, oh, look how small are all the houses. That's our small houses, okay? This is a wrong perception based on the distance of the senses. Or if I am on the car or on a boat and I see the trees passing and looks like the trees are, I am still and the trees are walking. That's a wrong perception based on the senses. Or if a person is sick with jaundice, we say? Hepatitis? No? Jaundice, hepatitis, and when the eye becomes yellow. And what happens is that then everything that is white appears as yellow. So this person looks to the snow mountain and say, oh, look at the yellow snow mountain. Okay? But actually the snow mountain is never yellow, but this is a wrong perception, which is a direct wrong perception based on the senses. Okay? Then there is the part of doubt. Doubt is the mind that has no certainty. And they have three types of doubt. One doubt which is more near to the correct view, one doubt which is more near to the wrong view, and one doubt that is in between the two. It's like if I look at the flower and I say, is the flower permanent or impermanent? I don't know, but I think most probably it is permanent. Or most probably it is impermanent. Or I have no idea. I'm completely in between. But all of them is the mind of uncertainty. Okay? Then we have the subsequent cognition, which we have a lot of subsequent cognition, direct or non-conceptual and conceptual subsequent cognition. And the subsequent cognition, it means when we have a perception, and then after that is the continuity of the same perception. Okay? Even according to some modern research, it says that more than around 99% of our thoughts are just repetition of the previous thoughts. Okay? So basically what we are doing is that we listen to a sound and then we are just continuing to listen to the same sound. Okay? For example, when I play the bell, there is the first moment where we listen to the sound, and then it's just the continuity of the same perception. Okay? Or when we see something, there is the first moment we see that umbrella. It's there. Then after it's just like we continue on the same perception. It's not something new. We are not updating what is coming to us truly. We are just continuing on the same perception. Okay? So this is what we call the subsequent cognition. And then we have what we call the assumption. Assumption is when we are sure about something, but we had no direct or inferential reasons to understand it in that way. I think that the flower is impermanent, I don't know why. That's an assumption. I have no real logical reasoning and I have no direct experience about it. Okay? That person is a liar. Why? Because I think about it. I really don't know. I have an assumption. I have no correct logic for that and I have no direct experience. And like this we can go on and on and on. Assumptions can be good or bad. Even in the whole process of realizing emptiness, for example, first we need to have a correct assumption about emptiness, which is, the flower lacks inherent existence. Why? I don't know. I have no real logic reasoning to understand it deeply, but I'm sure it has no inherent existence. Second step, valid inferential cognition of the lack of inherent existence of the flower. I have a logic. I understand clearly why the flower lacks inherent existence. Because it is interdependent, and I make this logic clear within myself. Third step, non-conceptual. I have a direct, valid cognition of the lack of inherent existence of the flower. The process is first a correct assumption, then a valid inferential cognition, and then a direct cognition. Okay. So the assumption can be good or bad, depend what type of can be correct or wrong. Then we have the next one, which is what we call the non-ascertaining perceiver or cognition, which basically it is when we receive information and we are not aware of this information. For example, in this very right moment, our heart is beating, right? I hope so. But can we feel the heart beating? Can we feel the touch, the inner sensation of touch of the heart beating? Or can we listen to the sound of the heart beating right now? Are we listening to it or not? Me, no. Okay. Am I feeling my heart beating right now? No. Okay. But is the sensation of beating actually, does it exist? Yes, but I am not aware of it. Okay. It's like the sound of the heart beating is also there, but because there are many other sounds which are much louder, I'm not able to perceive it. It is there, but I'm not aware of it. It is said that when they put people in this sort of chambers where it's total silent, people are not able to stay for long there, because if we go into that, we start listening to our heart, we start listening to the sound of the blood flowing in our veins, and we start listening to the sound of the bones moving also. And it's quite shocking. These sounds, they do exist right now, but we are not aware of them, because they have many other sounds much louder happening, okay? The same way, our attention is a more gross level, but we are not able to feel our heart. But the heart is beating, and the sensation of touch of the heart beating is there. So, again, from modern science, it says that in 1 second, the brain receives around 2 billion informations, of which we are just aware of 2,000. Okay? So all these other 1,999,000 and so on, it is actually part of what? Of this non-ascertaining perceiver. Are informations that we receive, but we are not clearly aware of what is happening. Okay? So these are basically the different types of primary mind. It's one of the way of classifying the primary mind. Okay? And it is important for us to understand this, because then mainly we can understand the process. The objective is to have a direct perception. But in order to have a direct perception of something, especially if it's something immaterial, first we need to have a correct assumption, then we need to have we need to go through the inferential cognition, and then we go to the direct cognition. Even if we take the path to enlightenment, we have the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of no more learning. We can divide it based on this. The path of accumulation is basically when during the path of accumulation we have a correct assumption about emptiness. Okay. Then the practitioner enters the path of preparation, okay, when actually he has an inferential valid cognition of emptiness through which he can meditate single-pointed with shamatha and vipassana upon it. But the object of meditation is the mental image that happens through a valid inferential cognition. There is perfect logic. Then what we call realizing emptiness, what is the realization of emptiness? Is when the person is able to generate a direct valid cognition of emptiness. That's when enters the path of seeing. Okay? So, actually, even to understand the path of enlightenment, all of this, it's important to see this, okay? Then if we would see, for example, bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, it is also a primary mind, okay? Bodhicitta is a primary mind which is made of many mental factors and is a mental cognition, is a mental primary mind. It's not from the senses, okay? Again, we can start by generating bodhicitta conceptually until a moment where it becomes a direct experience, a direct cognition of the need to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. One thing is, I want to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings conceptually. Another thing is, I truly, deeply wish it and I want it inside. That's a direct experience of bodhicitta. Okay? So our objective is to go from an inferential cognition to a direct cognition. And that's why first we meditate a lot on the inferential level, on the conceptual level, in order to generate the direct experience of things. Okay? And, all right. The important thing here is for us to just have this understanding that we have valid cognition, non-valid cognition. It's not obvious to understand what is a valid and what is non-valid very often. Okay? This is why we study the whole process of understanding logics, because the only way to know if an inferential cognition is correct or not correct is checking if the logics we are adding is correct or not. Okay? And but the important thing to know for us now is to understand that there are these different types of mind perceptions, which basically is direct and inferential, valid and non-valid. Okay? Then in the non-valid, we have the subsequent one, and we have doubt, and we have the non-ascertaining perception, and so on. But basically, the main difference that we make is direct and inferential, correct and non-correct. Okay? This is the main division that we make right now. Okay? I think it's, as a general view, is quite clear, right? Okay? Okay. Now we go back then. Let me just see if there is something here still for us to go through. Yeah. Okay. So now we go back to page number 14. Okay. Now, primary mind, if it's a direct cognition, if it is an inferential cognition, if it's a correct or if it's incorrect, it's always made of mental factors. Okay? So if we take any mind and we ask, what is this mind made up of? It's made up of mental factors. So let's try to understand this a little bit better, okay? So, the next part, as we start going through the mental factors, is the first thing that we have already said yesterday and today, and we have already repeated many times, but we will repeat once again, because it's something that is important for us to understand, is that the mental factors and the primary mind are of the same nature. We cannot make a distinction between, here are the mental factors and here is the primary mind. It's like if we take a soccer team and we say, okay, there are 11 players in a soccer team, and one thing is the players, the other thing is the team. They cannot be separated. So when they enter the field to play, we cannot say, first the players will enter, then the team will enter. Or first the team will enter, then the players will enter. That's not possible. If the players are there, the team is there. If the team is there, the players are there. Okay, similar to that, If the mental factors are present, the primary mind is present. If the primary mind is present, the mental factors are present, because the mental factors are the different aspects that compose that mind. Okay? And independently, if it is a primary, if it is a direct or inferential cognition, if it is valid or non-valid, it's always composed by mental factors. So let's see what are these mental factors. Before that, let's see, there are 5 aspects that make the primary mind and the mental factors being of the same nature, which we have here in page 14, which are called the 5 concomitant aspects. We have Ten Tsumba, the same base, Migpa Tsumba, the same object of perception, Nampa Tsumba, the same aspect, Tu Tsumba, the same time, and Ze Tsumba, the same substance, which means Ten Tsumba, it means it has the same base in the sense of the sense power, which, as I have written here, it's quite clear. For example, the valid visual direct cognition that perceives the form of a vase is the base on the eye sense power. The mental factors, such as sensation and discernment, are also based on vision. Every mind is based on one of the sense powers. We have the 5 sense powers, as we normally know, plus the mind sense power. Okay? So any mind that we have, any perception, is always based in one of our senses. So the primary mind and the mental factors that compose it will always go around this, will always be based on the same sense power. We cannot have the mind that perceives the shape of the vase, but the sensation is based on the sound of the bell. That's not possible. Okay? It's just the basis of the mind is always the same. The sense power is always the same. So all the mental factors that compose the mind, they also depend on that same sense power. Then we have the same object of perception, which means every thought always have an object of perception. If it is the sound of the bell, I am perceiving the sound of the bell. The primary mind that perceives the sound of the bell and the mental factors that perceive the sensation, the discrimination, the intention, the contact, the mental direction, and so on, which are the 5 omnipresent mental factors, they all focus on the same object, the sound of the bell. It's the sensation of the sound, the discrimination of the sound, and so on. Okay? The third aspect, the third part, is that they have the same aspect, which means I can listen to the sound, or I can see the cup, and the cup can have an aspect of being something big, or being something small, of being pleasurable, of being unpleasurable. It can be a cup, it can be a weight to put on top of paper. It can be seen as many different things. The aspect, the mode of appearance of the object to the primary mind and to the mental factors that create it is the same. It cannot be like, to the mental factor is small and to the other mental factor is big, to the primary mind is medium. This doesn't exist. It always have the same mode of apprehension, the same way of appearance. Okay? Then they have the same time. The same time means when the mental factor starts, the primary mind also starts. When the primary mind ends, the mental factor also ends. They have the beginning, middle, and end together. There is no when the mental factor is there, but the primary mind has not yet arrived. This does not exist. It's always together. And the last one is that they have the same substance, which means that for every primary mind, there is only one of each mental factor per type. So we cannot have one primary mind with 2 different sensations, for example. So it's possible that can we have at the same time a sensation of pleasure and a sensation of suffering? For example, when I am watching a movie, can I have a sensation of pleasure based on the music and a sensation of suffering based on the image that I see? Can I have, that's a beautiful sound but an ugly image? It's a little bit incoherent. It's not so nice inside, but it's possible to have 2 different. It's like we see a person, what a beautiful person, but the voice is really not so nice. Or we can have whatever, okay? Or when we taste something and we say, oh, the taste is good, but the taste is good, but the temperature is too hot. Okay, temperature is touch, taste is taste. Okay, so what happens is that we can have a total of 6 primary minds at the same time, one for each sense, and each primary mind have one sensation, which is one of the 5 omnipresent mental factors. Okay, it's one of the main substance, one of the main ingredients of the primary mind. So we can have at the same time 6 sensations. Normally we try to have experiences where they are coherent, where what I see is pleasurable, what I listen is pleasurable, what I touch, what I smell, we try to put all of them together. Okay? But we can have them being incoherent also. But I cannot have at the same time what I see is pleasurable and unpleasurable at the same time. This is not possible. Or is a sensation of pleasure, or is a sensation of suffering. The same thing is for the discernment, the name that I give. Or is one thing or is another thing. I cannot give the 2 different names at the same time to the same object. Okay? So, and at the same time, one mental factor can only be part of one primary mind. We cannot have the same sensation for more than one primary mind. So I cannot have the same sensation for what I see, for what I listen, and for what I touch. They can be similar, but they would never be the same. I have one sensation that is for what I see, one sensation that is for what I listen, one sensation that is for what I touch, one sensation that is for what I remember, and like this we can go on. Okay? So this is what it means when it says that they have the same substance. We don't have 2 of the same type of mental factors within the same primary mind. This is, for example, very important when we discuss more and when we debate to understand better the meaning of bodhicitta, but I'm not going to go into details about this now, maybe later. Okay? So we explained many times that the mental factors and the primary mind are of the same nature. They are actually like the parts that compose the unity. But the unity don't exist without the parts of the unity don't exist without the unity. They are always together. So whenever there is the mental factor, there is the primary mind. Wherever there is the primary mind, there are the mental factors that compose that mind. Okay? Well, I think it's clear, no? Okay. A perception is a primary mind. Okay, can have different perceptions. Have the perception of sound, of form, and so on. There is not one mind that is the unity of all the 6 minds together. Normally not. We divide into the 6 consciousness. Okay? So, it can have only one per type. It can have minimum of 5 mental factors, but it cannot have 2 mental factors of the same kind. So, before we stop for today, just very briefly, I would like just to give a very general idea of the 51 mental factors. So we start entering into the 51 mental factors, then tomorrow we will go into details. Okay? So if we go in page number 15, I have divided them into the groups. I have first enlisted all the 51 mental factors. And they are divided into 6 groups. Where the first group is called Kundronga, the 5 omnipresent mental factors, which, following the metaphor that we used yesterday, is the 5 basic ingredients to make our dish of a thought. So the 5 basic ingredients is the 5 omnipresent mental factors, which is, from all the mental factors, I think the most important that we need to learn. Then the second group is called the 5 object ascertaining mental factors, or the 5 determinating mental factors, which is 5 mental factors that do not need to be there necessarily, but if they are there, they make the object of perception more strong. They make the primary mind more strong. If following the same metaphor, when the more ingredients we have from the group of the 5 object ascertaining mental factors, the stronger becomes the taste. Good or bad, but the taste becomes stronger. Okay? Then we have the Gewa Chukchik, the 11 wholesome or virtual mental factors, which are the ingredients that make a good taste. Then we have the 6 root afflicting mental factors and the 20 secondary afflicting mental factors, Sanyon Druk and Nyenyo Nisho, which are the ones that make a bad taste, are our mental defilements. Then we have the last group, which is the 4 variable mental factors, Shingyurshi, which they have some sort of neutral taste, and according to what you put, they can become good or bad. Okay, they are not by themselves good or bad, depending what are the other ingredients that we put together. Okay, so these are the 6 groups that we have. So putting all together, they make the 51 mental factors. As I said before, it is not that there are only 51 mental factors. There are more mental factors, but 51 is the way how Buddha have in the Abhidharma put together and explained the mental factors. And it's very complete. Okay, but still there can be more or another mental factor that is not described in here. I believe that the most important part that we need actually to understand, first of all, from my point of view, is the 5 omnipresent mental factors and the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. These are the first 10 ones, are the most important ones for us, I believe. Then all the others are also important, but I want to put in these days emphasis mainly on these first 10 mental factors, okay? The first 2 groups. So we will start tomorrow by seeing the first group, and the first group is Kundrongani Tsorwadan Dushe Sempa Yiche Rek. The 5 omnipresent mental factors are feeling, discernment, intention, attention, and contact. Okay? We will see what is the meaning of each one of this. What I have prepared for you is this text where we can see from page 19 it starts. And for each one of the 51 mental factors, where there is a description, a definition of the mental factor, which is written in bold. And we can see the reason why it's written in bold, because this is coming from the Abhidharma Samachaya, one text which was written by a Sangha. You remember I told yesterday the story of a Sangha, which was this great master of our lineage, of the extensive lineage, that had a realization of Buddha Maitreya after 12 years of retreat and so on. So it's from a text that he wrote. So these are his words. Okay? So I thought it's very, very special to have his words written here in order for us to go to this text. So I had the translation of this, and then I have added some extra explanation and some parts which are translations of the commentary. So that we can go through each one of them and without much hurry. And we will go through each one of the mental factors and understand them one by one. Okay? And as I said, I will put more emphasis in the first 10. And then the other ones are more easy, that we can go through the other ones even a little bit more quickly. But I like to put more emphasis in the first 10 mental factors. Okay? All of them are important, but I believe the first 10 are somehow more important. Okay? If we need to put a priority, I would give priority to the first 10. Okay? So we will follow this tomorrow. I advise everyone who can, please, to read at least the first 10 mental factors for tomorrow. If you can start reading them, because then when you come to the teachings, it is something that you already have some understanding about it. And it's not something that is enough to read once. We need to read it many times. And then, anyhow, tomorrow we'll go through the understanding explanation and we can understand everything. I'm quite sure about that. So, one thing which is just important is that the Eastern way of learning how the Buddhist teachings are placed also is not in a linear way how we are used to do in the Western system, in which we learn something, we understand it fully, then we go to the next step, we understand it fully, then we go to the next step. We cannot have the pretension to understand everything at once. It is more like first we understand one part, then we have another piece, then another piece, then another piece, then another piece, and then suddenly we put all the pieces together and then we have a whole image. Like when I first learned this, I went to my teacher, I had no idea what it was about. I simply memorized the whole text. No? Semjung abjoza jenyi kundronga da yungenga gewa juje zanyondro nyenyo yeshe gyältsän kundronga ni tsorwadan dushe semba yicherek. Like this, it's made on verses, so it's more easy to know all of them. You know. And then I go to the teachings, and then first one part, then another part, and slowly put all the parts together, okay? So this is how we do. I try to explain with the two methods together, with the linear way and the cyclic way together. We try to put the two systems together, okay? So we stop here for today, and I just ask, please, everybody who can, to read a little bit of it for tomorrow, okay? Jetsun lame kutse rapten chi namkar tinle cholchur gepadang losan tempe dreme sasumgi drowe musel taltu ne gyurchi nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshin nintsen taktu delekpe Concho sumge jinge sumge ngodrup sol concho sumge trashisho de sol a sol, à noite ou ao meio-dia, possam as três joias conceder-nos suas bênçãos, possam as três joias ajudar-nos a alcançar todas as realizações, possam as três joias espalhar muitos sinais auspiciosos no caminho de nossas vidas. At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspicion. All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possono i tre gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possono aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere il sentiero della nostra vita con molti segni di buon auspicio. Oma Tönpa Lama Sangye Rinpoche, Kyopa Lama Tamcho Rinpoche, Drenpa Lama Gendu Rinpoche, Kyamne Kuncho Sumla Chopa Bu.